Hello, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. It is about 4:43 on Thursday, December 8th. Wow. You can't see this. This is going to be the very last online lecture I'm going to offer you for the semester. I know that you are terribly upset about that. And I'm going to offer you some code words throughout this little lecture that's going to be very, very brief. And you can put those code words together to form a phrase, and if you email me that phrase, I will give you 5 points bonus on both the campaign project as well as the inaugural address. And I will email you something about this. But you're on your honor, once you find out what's going on here, to not tell anybody else. Okay, so this is, and just as you recall, well, you know when everything is due. In any case, I'm going to get to it, so this is going to be very, very brief. The first word is puppy. The first word is puppy. Okay, so basically what I wanted to do here is to offer you a final sort of larger abstract idea about leadership and tying it to the presidency. And basically the little handout that I have for you that's on KC is titled The Presidency and Rhetorical Leadership. And all this comes from this particular book edited by Leroy G. Dorsey, The Presidency and Rhetorical Leadership. And I think it's a very, very good book. And what I do in these, the first sort of bullet points is to try to capture the essence of the introduction in order to, capture the essence of what I'm trying to tell you. And the large idea is prudence. Prudence, 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 prudence. What is prudence? Think about it for a second. Yeah, there you go. So basically, the idea here is that the president is a rhetorical leader, needs to be a rhetorical leader, but a successful rhetorical leader must be prudential. A successful rhetorical leader, whether it's the presidency or any sort of context, needs to have and perform prudence. Okay? So, rhetorical leadership, effective rhetorical leadership, good prudence or prudence. Okay, so what is that? We'll get to it later. Dorsey starts by sort of saying and asking, what is rhetorical leadership in the first place? And this is what he writes. At face value, the term appears fairly straightforward because, well, it is. It is leadership exerted through talk or persuasion. It is more complicated than that, but it all goes back to how we define political communication at the beginning of the semester as a process of communication, solving public problems. So it's a process of persuasion. And he indicates that generally leadership represents a means whereby a person influences another person or group to achieve a common aim. So a rhetorical leader tries to influence folks toward some sort of common aim, whatever that might be. Maybe it's make America great again, whatever the hell that means. The second word is monkey. The second word is monkey. Okay. And then, so basically leadership and what we're thinking about is grounded in the practice of rhetoric. And sort of the old sort of Aristotelian perspective of rhetoric, the art of finding in any given situation the available means of persuasion. What are the things that I can do in this given context with the arguments, everything that I have at my disposal to persuade or influence other folks. So then he talks about prudential leadership. And I do think there's a key paragraph that I'm going to sort of read to you since you don't have this book. And by the way, if you ever do this, I don't know, the way that I read, and I number my paragraphs and everything like that, so I can go back to all this stuff. So I have in my notes here, paragraph 18 on page 10 is cool. So, what it says, sort of what I've already said, but so what is the lesson for accountants, soldiers, and presidents? That is, if they want to be rhetorical leaders. Successful rhetorical leadership comes from the demonstration of, at any given moment, the artful balance of superior decision-making skills and the exhibition of the requisite character. So decision-making skills plus character. Thus, contemporary chief executives who are seeking to lead rhetorically should embrace the classical notion of prudence, a concept central to the rhetorical tradition from classical to contemporary times. And the key word, I think, in there is balance. Balance, balance, balance. That's sort of the idea throughout the whole, history of prudence. Balance, balance, balance. Now, here, I'll just read onward because it's very important. Aristotle, for example, defined the prudent person as being able to deliberate finely about things that are good and beneficial for himself and what sorts of things promote living well in general. Balance. The successful political leader particularly needed what Aristotle considered this virtue of thought. Prudential leadership then represented a practical intelligence, coupled with the ability to reason soundly in order to accomplish the goals necessary for the livelihood of all. A prudent leader was not required to have wisdom, Aristotle wrote, because wisdom derived from the principles of science and the truth about the principles. Wisdom concerned the scientific understanding, blah, 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 blah. In contrast, a leader's job centered on bettering the life of his charges by finding a reasonable mean between existential choices. Prudence, Aristotle observed, is about human concerns, about things open to deliberation. The unqualified good deliberator is the one whose aim accords with rational calculation in pursuit of the best good for a human being that is available in action. A prudent leader, then, is deliberate, rational, choosing among options that can be realized in the world as it is and what would likely ensure the community's well-being. Blah, 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 blah. Practical. That's what it is. Prudence is practical wisdom. And there's so much stuff about it. But the idea is that we want to find the middle ground. We want to find the golden mean. We want to think in terms of moderation. We want to think in terms of what is ideally good with what is practically possible. So practicality, practicality, practicality. That's generally what prudence is. So the side note here is just me, and it boils down a lot to how Aristotle talked about ethos in a way. When he talked about ethos, he talked about habits of life, and obviously it grows out of the speaker's excellence or virtue, and prudence is that sort of practical, phronesis is a virtue. Some people call the larger idea of virtue arete, and it's interpreted through how people perform it, right? So when I tell you, make an argument for why we should do this or that, you sort of see my brain and how it works, that deliberation, that habit of life, in a sense. So in a sense, since rhetoric is a practical art in the practical public world, we are, again, interested in practical wisdom, phronesis, and the Latin, or just prudence. This is what Hauser, somebody else says. I don't have his book here. We still seek rhetors who manifest phronesis in their discourse. We interpret prudent deliberation as a sign of their character. And so basically what we're doing is public decisions. We need to balance the ideal good, I know I'm being redundant here, and the practically possible. So that's prudence. That's sort of what's expedient. What's the most practical thing to do? And I'll let you sort of read the other stuff. But basically, at the end of the day, it is about Aristotle's golden mean. I don't know if you remember the golden mean, but it's the idea that virtue lies within the middle of the extremes. And so if courage, for instance, is in the middle of the extremes of being cowardly and being suicidal or stupid, kamikaze, right? So in the middle, that's courage. And it's just sort of the idea of moderation as well. Louisiana, where I got my PhD, has their state motto has something about moderation in there. But what's moderation? It's the avoidance of excess, right? You don't want to, maybe you don't want to eat no chips. You don't want to eat a bag of chips. So maybe a couple of chips. That's prudence. That's more practical. So think about this in terms of politics, right? And so the prudential person, the successful rhetorical leader, is someone who can influence folks by saying, okay, I've weighed the pros and the cons, I've balanced the ideal good with the practically possible. Here's what we should do. It's about compromise. It's about not being rigid. And so, for instance, let's totally get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Is that prudence? Is that prudential? I would say no, because what's the middle ground? Maybe we get rid of some of it that people don't like, but there are a lot of things in there that I think are very good, like the what's it called? The thing where you already have it, whatever. I can't even think of what that's called. Well, there's good things about it. So what's the middle ground? What's the practical thing that we can do to help the most people? It's like, we should get rid of welfare. What's the middle ground? What can we try to do something where people don't abuse it, but still help people? What's the practical thing to do? So that's prudence. So what I would urge you to consider, when you are thinking about life, if you want to be a politician one of these days, what's the middle ground? What's practical? What can we do? It might not be the ideal, but we need to get things done. We need to solve public problems to the best of our ability. What's the practical thing that we can do? And then this idea that, we're going to do this, I'm never going to raise taxes. Got to have revenue, or Grover Norquist is an idiot. But so that's the idea. So as you are thinking about it, but also as you're critiquing politicians, do they seem open to compromise? Are they being practical? Are they thinking about a balance between the ideal good and the practically possible, or between these ideas and these ideas? Do we have prudence in Congress? No. They're all so divisive and everything like that. What's the middle? Bring people together. What practically can we do? So that's prudence. The final word is baby. So the phrase is puppy, monkey, baby. Take care. Go be prudent.